You're not in danger right now. Nothing is wrong, but somewhere between your shoulders or behind your eyes, there is a small, quiet cord of tension pulled tight. It's the feeling of being on even when there is nothing to do. A persistent internal pressure that doesn't wait for a crisis to arrive. It is just there. Your mind is moving through the day's unfinished edges, the conversation that could have gone differently, the thing you might have missed, the problem that hasn't arrived yet but feels like it's coming. You're not anxious about anything specific. You're just on, and you've been on for a long time. Most people think of stress as a reaction. Something happens, the body responds, then eventually it settles. But that's not what you experience. For you, stress doesn't wait for something to happen. It runs ahead of events. It scans the horizon before anything appears. This isn't overreaction, it's anticipation, and there's a difference. Most people think of stress as a reaction to something bad, a deadline, a conflict, a loss. But for you, the stress exists in the gaps between those things. It's the background noise of your life. It's the inability to fully inhabit the chair you're sitting in because part of your mind is already 3 hours ahead, rehearsing a conversation or troubleshooting a problem that hasn't started yet. What if this isn't a flaw in your character? What if this constant state of readiness isn't something you are doing wrong, but something your mind is doing to keep you safe? What if the stress isn't reacting to danger, but trying to prevent the possibility of it? Well, you have likely told yourself a specific set of stories to justify this tension. I'm just a responsible person. I have to think ahead. No one else will. I'll relax once things are finally stable. These stories transform a state of chronic nervous system guarding into a virtue. You've convinced yourself that the vigilance is the reason you're reliable, the reason things haven't fallen apart. Underneath that is a very specific fear, the fear of being surprised by failure. The logic is simple. If I stay tense, I stay alert. If I stay alert, I can't be caught off guard. If I can't be caught off guard, I am safe. In your mind, calm has become synonymous with vulnerability. To relax is to leave the gates unguarded. So you stay at your post, you scan, you prepare, you stay slightly exhausted because, to your brain, the exhaustion is a small price to pay for the illusion of control. Here is what that pattern looks like from the outside. The mind scans for potential problems, not real problems, possible ones. Once a potential problem is identified, the mind begins preparing, rehearsing responses, constructing contingency paths, running outcomes. This preparation creates a brief sense of relief. The situation feels handled, the threat feels managed, and so the brain learns something. It learns that vigilance worked. The next time uncertainty arrives, the same loop activates. Scan, prepare, brief calm, repeat. Over time, the loop becomes automatic. The scanning doesn't wait to be called. It begins on its own. Before the morning is fully started, before the day has presented anything to worry about, the brain isn't malfunctioning. It's following a pattern it believes keeps you safe. You are reacting, not failing. The problem is that the brain doesn't distinguish between a real threat and an anticipated one. When you spend your morning mentally rehearsing an argument that never happens, your body still undergoes the process of the fight. Muscles tighten, breath shallows. The body responds to the rehearsal as though it were the event itself. By the time you reach the end of your day, you are physically depleted by things that only occurred in your mind. What makes this pattern difficult to notice is that it tends to wear useful disguises. It looks like responsibility. It looks like thoroughness. It looks like the kind of thinking that prevents mistakes. And in some situations, it does. Anticipatory awareness is genuinely valuable. The problem isn't the ability. The problem is when the ability doesn't switch off. When the scanning runs during conversations, during meals, during moments that don't require it. When rest begins to feel like a lapse in attention rather than a natural part of living. There's a particular quality to this kind of stress that's worth naming precisely. It doesn't feel like panic. It doesn't feel dramatic. It feels like a background hum, a quiet pressure that sits just behind ordinary experience. You can function through it. Most people around you wouldn't notice it. You might not describe it as stress at all, but the body is registering it continuously. The muscular tension held in the jaw, the shoulders, the chest, not because of one specific moment, but because of accumulated readiness. The body has been preparing for a long time. When vigilance is maintained long enough, the nervous system begins to recalibrate. What once felt like heightened alertness begins to feel like baseline. Calm, when it occurs, starts to feel slightly unfamiliar, almost suspicious. If something isn't occupying the mind begins to search for something to occupy it, not because there's danger, but because stillness has started to feel like a gap where something important might be missed. Think about the last time you had nothing to do. Did you actually do nothing? Or did you find a way to make nothing productive? Did you scroll through information? Did you plan your next week? Did you worry about why you weren't feeling more relaxed? When the system never turns off, even rest becomes a form of preparation. This is where the identity friction becomes unavoidable. You find yourself saying, "I'm just wired this way," or "I've always been high-strung." But consider the possibility that this isn't who you are. It's how you've learned to survive. There is a meaningful difference between being a stressed person and having a nervous system that has forgotten how to stand down. If you grew up in an environment where things were unpredictable, or where your value was tied to your performance, or where you had to be the stable one, your brain adopted this vigilance as a tool. It was a precise strategy. It kept you reliable. It kept you prepared. It made you the person people could count on. But a tool you cannot put down eventually becomes a burden. When you describe yourself as high-strung, or wired a certain way, or simply someone who thinks too much, are you describing your nature? Or are you describing a pattern you adopted so thoroughly that it started to feel like nature? The vigilance isn't your personality. It's a posture, one the nervous system developed over time in response to a world that seemed to reward preparation. If you were to let go of the stress right now, if you were to truly, deeply relax, who would you be? For many, that question is unsettling. Without the stress, something feels missing. Without the tension, there is nothing to orient around. This is the delayed insight. The stress has become your navigation system. You use it to move through the world. Without it, the world feels unsteady. You aren't high-strung. You are practicing a permanent posture of protection. Humans evolved to respond to danger briefly, intensely, and then release. The response was never designed to be continuous. It was designed to spike, resolve, and return to rest. But modern environments often reward continuous preparation. Anticipation is mistaken for diligence. Constant readiness is treated as a virtue. We have made calm feel irresponsible. So the nervous system does what it was designed to do. It responds to the environment it's in. In an environment where preparation is always rewarded and rest is rarely modeled, the system learns to stay active. This is not a personal failure. It's adaptation. The pattern formed because it made sense to form. Think of it this way. The stress was a loyal soldier. It showed up every day. It kept watch. It prepared for every possible threat. The soldier doesn't know the war is over. It only knows the mission it was given. And the mission was to keep you safe from surprise. Protection systems are useful, and they exist because something needed protecting. But when they become your permanent residence, the walls start to close in. There's a difference between preparing for difficulty and living inside preparation. One is a response. One is a residence. Most of what creates ongoing stress isn't the presence of actual danger. It's the anticipation of danger that hasn't arrived, the rehearsal of problems that may not materialize, the sustained readiness for outcomes that remain hypothetical. The body experiences that readiness as real. And over time, the distinction between the preparation and the event begins to collapse. You are not broken for operating this way. The pattern was built carefully. It served a function. It protected something that mattered. What changes isn't the person. It's the awareness that the pattern exists, that it has a shape, that it can be seen. Recognition is not resolution, but it is the only place where anything else becomes possible. Notice today the difference between responding to what's here and preparing for what might come. Not as a task, just as an observation. You are not the tension in your shoulders. You are the one who notices the tension. The scanning is not who you are. It's what you learned.